Lip piercings. You know, piercings are done to your lip, lower one, with a ring. And we'll get into reasons and et cetera on that one here in a bit. Also, we're going to give you 5 pros, 5 cons. Also going to go through what you should know beforehand, the piercing experience, healing, jewelry, living with a piercing, and what happens if you don't want it anymore. Coming up next on Pros and Cons by a Piercer, Season 2, Episode number 19. So you might want to stick around. For those that are new to the channel, first off, welcome to the channel. Hope you're enjoying the videos. Hoping you're finding them entertaining and fulfilling and educational. But you may not know who I am. Just in case you don't, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I own and I operate the Axiom Body Piercing Studio located right here in Des Moines, Iowa, inside the Skin Kitchen Tattoo. So, when I talk to you about these things, I'm talking with a level of expertise that comes from being in the body piercing industry for well over 26 years. Now, today, what we're going to talk about is lip piercings. And when I define lip piercings, I'm defining them as ones done with rings or curved barbells that is done more outside the mouth and more like what's commonly known as a vertical labret piercing. I know everybody wants to attach labret or labret or labret or however you decide you want to pronounce it to center piercings. However, they are 2 different completely angled piercings. I was not taught to do lip piercings straight into the mouth. I was taught to do them at an angle just inside that rougher texture of the outside of your lips, into that smooth tissue on the inside. The reason why I like to specify this is a lot of times people will go in for lip piercings. They say they want rings. They'll get talked out of getting it done with rings. And granted, they are more difficult to heal. I won't say that isn't the case. However, I've had thousands upon thousands of people heal out with rings. Hands down. Done it not millions of times. Hundreds of thousands of times, possibly. No issues, no problems. They are a little bit more difficult to heal than the studs, but the advantage of the rings and being more outside the mouth is that it has less contact with your teeth. So what I suggest is when you do go in and you talk to your piercer, talk to them about what your end goals are. If you are planning on wearing studs in that, you should get a labret-style piercing that's straight through. If you're thinking about you want to have rings, then yes, you should pierce initially with either a ring or a curved barbell. Once it's pierced this way, more outside the mouth, you're not going to be able to wear a labret stud in there. It's just going to get caught on your teeth constantly. Curved barbells possibly, but pretty much you're stuck with rings. With labrets, where it's done this way, directly into the mouth, the problem is finding rings that comfortably fit all the way around your lip, but also do not come in contact with your teeth and gums. It's an issue. A little bit about history. Lip piercings have a long history that dates back to pretty much most tribal cultures in the South America, the Americas, Pacific Rim, Africa, Asia. There's a lot of examples of this particular piercing being done by native people for thousands upon thousands of years. The modern version of it was pretty much developed in the 1980s, late 80s, early 90s, part of the initial wave of modern body piercing. It's always kind of been there from the start, as far as I know. It may date back as far as the 1970s. If you really want to dig into it, you can say that the punk rockers were doing it, but those were not really permanent piercings that were usually done solely for shock value and not worn for very long at all. Okay, let's get into the meat and potatoes. Let's get into those pros, the cons, the things that give this the title that it has, starting with the pros, the things we like about this piercing, the things that are great with this piercing, the things that say or make you say, hey, I want to get this piercing. Starting with number 1, this piercing, obviously because it dates back to thousands upon thousands of years, has a long history of healing. It's not an experimental piercing. It's not an edge piercing. It's not one that you're probably going to have issues healing out. It'll probably heal fairly successfully with little or no issues. Number 2, the rings, where it's pierced more outside the mouth, has less of a risk to damaging teeth and gums because it's further away from the structure of your mouth, including your bones. It's less likely to cause problems as a labret piercing would that's straight through. Number 3, can be done in groups or bites, as they are commonly called. Things like spider bites, snake bites, canine bites, and all kinds of bites. This piercing, because there's a lot of real estate there, you have a lot of options of placement. You have a lot of options of what combination of piercings you want. It can be either very just subtle, with just like one, or it can be multiple ones. Number 4, it's a quick healer. Usually healing out in anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. It'll finish that first stage of healing and no longer be an open wound. Number 5, this piercing doesn't impact sleeping or other lifestyle changing things as much as, say, ear piercings and other facial piercings well. It tends to be a little bit more protected and a little bit more inside the range of contact. Of course, if you sleep flat on your face with your head buried in the pillow, you're going to probably have problems, but otherwise it's not going to impact things even as much as, say, a nose piercing would. Now, before we move on to the cons, if you like this video, find it informative, find it useful, find it entertaining, or you just love the sound of my voice, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you liked it, because we like it when you like it. If you would like to see more of these and not miss out on any of the videos that we post, do subscribe. Hit that notification bell so that you're notified every single time we post something. And, of course, share, because you should share. Now it's time to talk about the cons, the disadvantages, things that we don't like about this piercing, the things that make us go, not for me. Starting with number 1, risk to damage, or the possibility of damage to teeth, gums, and the bone structure of your mouth. Like I did say, this one is a lower risk than other oral piercings. I would say out of all of them, it has the lowest risk. However, chewing on the piercing, sucking your lip in, playing with it, etc., will increase the likelihood of damage and etc. So there is always that possibility. Number 2, if you do this with a ring, you're pretty much limited to only 2 styles of jewelry: rings and possibly, and I repeat, possibly curved barbells. You're not going to have all the options that you have with labret studs with lots of different ends and etc. You're kind of limited and packed into that area tight, but at the same time, there's lots of great styles, lots of very minimalistic designs that you can stick with. They're going to work fantastic in this piercing. It's just kind of limited on the bling bling. Number 3, swelling. Yes, this piercing swells like all oral piercing swells. It's going to mean that you have to change your diet for a short period of time, which I'll get into a little bit later. And you're going to have to deal with that thing being uncomfortable. Usually the swelling will last anywhere from 3 to 5 days. Usually kicks up on lip piercings and labret piercings about a day and a half to 2 days after the piercing is done. Number 4, can affect employment. This is a piercing that is very prominent and easy to see on your face. It's right there dead in center for the most part. People are going to notice it. Now, if you're working any type of profession where you're dealing with the general public or, I don't know, professional business people, they're going to frown on this piercing more than likely. There are some, there is always going to be a profession that you can have and have multiple lip piercings. Now, is that going to affect your employment status? Is it going to affect your income? Is it going to affect your advancement? That's the question. So really, depending on what you're planning on doing for a career, this piercing may be a job stopper in some cases. Also, you have to understand this is going to leave some scarring. Eventually, it will fade and get smaller and smaller as you get older, but it will be visible once that jewelry is initially removed. And number 5, this piercing, like most oral piercings, close very rapidly. It is not a piercing that you could just leave the jewelry out for days on end and easily put it back in. You just generate tissue very rapidly on the inside of your mouth. Now, I know I'm going to get a bunch of comments about, I left mine out for 5 years, toured the world, and came back, and it went in easily. I did not have to even force it in. You're the exception. You are the special ones. You are the piercing chosen people. I don't know. But the rest of us, usually if you leave it open, unless it's really stretched out to a very large, thick gauge, it is going to close on you before you can get the jewelry back in. You really have to wear something in this at all times. I'll cover that a little bit more later. Now that ends the pros and cons section of this particular video. However, we're going to move on to things you should know beforehand. And before I do that, check out our merch store. Plenty of t-shirts, plenty of designs, plenty of colors, and different types of products like phone cases, leggings, etc. Link is in the description. There's also usually one of those merch bars down below, too, to take a look at. Now, things you should look for. There's things you should know beforehand. First off, that your piercer is a professional, well-knowledgeable, informative, has a passion for what they do, offers a consultation without you asking for it, that covers things like aftercare, risks, and etc. The piercer should evaluate your anatomy to see what's going to be the best choice, jewelry-wise, and etc. for you. The other thing you should know is you are more acceptable to STDs during oral sex, so if you switch partners after getting this pierced, you should practice safe sex. This is not something that goes away as soon as you heal it. It is something that you're going to have for pretty much until you take the jewelry out. The thing is you have hard metal in soft tissue. The possibility of causing tears or cuts is possible. And then you have an exchange of bacteria, including a foreign pathogen that happens to be an STD, and then you have it. So, boys and girls and others, practice safe sex the way you're supposed to. Before agreeing to the piercing or going through the whole process of scheduling or what have you, you should talk to your piercer about what your end goal is. If your end goal is to wear a ring and a lip piercing, you need to discuss that with them and see if they're even willing to do that or have an alternative that's going to work with that jewelry, because that's what you want to wear once this piercing is healed. You should also take into consideration diet changes. If you're going to have to cut down on, and I'll get into these a little bit later, a lot of things that may agitate the piercing and lead to more swelling. So you need to understand that beforehand. It's a good idea to stock up with stuff. It's also a good idea before you come in to get it done, have your favorite meal. Eat something you love. Get that full belly, because you're probably not going to be able to eat that thing for a couple days at least. One final thing before we move on to the piercing experience itself. Does your piercer offer any type of aftercare product? Is it included in the price, or do they have it for sale? If not, can they tell you where you need to go to purchase that stuff so you can have it ahead of time? Just makes life easier. Now let's talk about the piercing experience itself. The first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a consultation. And in that consultation, they should cover things like how long it's going to take to heal, what it's going to take to heal it, cross-contamination prevention, risks that are involved with that particular piercing, evaluate your anatomy to know whether or not you're a great candidate or an okay candidate, and they should go through the jewelry selection process with you. Next up, waiver. Basically with this, it's going to have a list of questions. They're going to involve any health issues you have, any medication you're on, controlled or uncontrolled substance, any allergic reactions you have to any of the material that may be used in the process of piercing you. After that, the piercer should wash their hands. Then begin the setup process. Once they're set up, they will disinfect the area. Usually, I like to use betadine or providine iodine. A lot of people use any type of surgical scrub will work. Once that's done, we will begin the marking. And before you start the marking, if you haven't done it already, you need to talk to them about the fact that you eventually want to wear a ring in this particular piercing. And you don't want it a half or 3/8 of an inch inside your mouth where you're not going to be able to have one. So talk to them about that and discuss the placement and how that would change if it is going to be done with a ring or some form of curved jewelry. The placement should be roughly about 1/8 of an inch below the lip line. If you pinch down like this, you'll feel that kind of thicker tissue. It should be below that. The inside should be just inside the smoother part of the lip. If you run your tongue, you'll notice your outer lips are kind of rough, and then it gets really smooth as you get down into that cheek material. It should be inside that, often referred to as the dry or the wet. This, like many piercings, in my opinion, should be done with forceps. Clamp down to make sure that the tissue is compacted, and the piercing is going to be going in a straight line in where we want it. If it's done with ring, you do it from the outside inward. Push the needle out with the jewelry. Well, first you remove the forceps, then put the jewelry in, close it up, stop any bleeding that may occur. Immediately afterwards, it's not going to be uncommon to see a little bit of slight bleeding off and on for a few minutes in some cases. Usually have some aching or throbbing, maybe some heat in the area. That should fade usually in a couple minutes. After that, it's going to be tender to the touch for probably the rest of the day, and we'll get into normal reactions. We get into aftercare. But you might see a tad bit of bruising. Sometimes it'll happen on the inside of the mouth. It's pretty rare, but it's possible. With bruising, any piercing, if you have bruising around it, give it a day or two to clear up. If it seems like it's getting worse or it's not going away, you need to contact your piercer or a medical professional. Now let's get into healing. Average healing time on this, like I said before, is anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks, up to 16 in some cases. You're going to use saline. I like Nelmed piercing aftercare. You want to use it twice daily. For the first 2 weeks, you want to rinse with a alcohol-free antiseptic mouthwash. My favorite, Biotine. I've been using it for I don't know how long. It is great, wonderful, helps with dry mouth, and is very mild. Also, I would suggest rinsing with warm water and sea salt a couple times a day, more so if it feels good. It'll do a lot to kind of make things feel better and keep it on that track for healing. All that you only need to do for the first 2 weeks. To reduce swelling, you want to cut down your intake of tobacco, alcohol, cannabis, hot and spicy foods, things that are extremely warm in temperature, or anything that may agitate your mouth. Limit movement, limit talking, etc. Do not play with the piercing. The other thing is often sleeping with your head elevated higher than your heart will reduce the amount of swelling that you see too. Gently sucking on ice chips for the first 24 to 28 hours will help. If you've never had any problems taking over-the-counter anti-inflammatories, they may help too. Now, you need to practice cross-contamination prevention. Keep those little microorganisms from working their way into that healing wound. Things like clean your hands before you handle it, no oral contact, deep mouth kissing, or sexual contact for a minimum of 8 weeks. As I mentioned before, you are more acceptable to STDs during oral sex, so if you switch partners, what do? You practice safe sex the way you're supposed to. Keep clothing, bedding, towels, anything that may come in contact with the piercing cleaned on a regular basis. No swimming until it's healed. Keep pets away from it. Do not let them sleep in the bed with you. Do not share food items or utensils with other people. Make sure that your own utensils are cleaned on a regular basis. It is a good idea to start with a fresh toothbrush and then keep it in an airtight container far away from the bathroom. Fecal matter, people. Fecal matter. Open wound. Fecal matter. Not a good combination. Also, avoid sticking unclean objects in your mouth, like, of course, dirty fingers, pin caps, toothpicks, etc., etc., etc. Of course, avoid contact or trauma to the area while it's healing and even afterwards. Elevate the piercing off the bed. Make sure that it's not in contact with your pillow or anything else. First 3 to 5 days, you might experience a little bit of slight bleeding off and on, redness, discolorization, heat, tenderness to the touch, and, of course, swelling, inflammation. This is all normal reactions to the trauma that is created by doing the piercing. Now, with most oral piercings, it is not uncommon for a couple of odd things to happen. The first thing is to see a white ring of tissue form around the inside of your mouth. That's scar tissue. It can be kind of clear or opaque in some cases. Also, you might see this nasty looking yellowish stringy stuff hanging off the jewelry on the inside. Kind of looks like snot. That doesn't mean it's infected. What that is a normal discharge you have with any piercing, but because it's in your mouth or it can't harden and collect on the jewelry, it forms these nasty looking strings. Just rinse. Anything else occurs, see your piercer or contact a medical professional. Next up, jewelry. With this piercing, like I stated before, your best option if you're going to do this style is rings or curved jewelry. You do not want to wear labret studs. Having that flat disc at the top of your lip is going to get caught on everything. Simple is always best, especially with the parts that are going to be inside your mouth. Part of the advantage of this particular piercing is the simplicity of the jewelry and the fact that it tends to be a lot more secure, and keeping it out of the mouth and elegant and simple is usually best. Of course, if you do end up with a curved barbell, like a vertical labret, you do want to check the tightness of the balls on a regular basis. They tend to have a mind of their own, and they always are trying to run away from home. They unscrew and then run away from home to get corrupted by God knows what's on the floor behind that toilet. Now, living with the piercing. The jewelry should be left in at all times. I've mentioned this a number of times. I know I do, and that's just to make sure you understand that. You generally can produce tissue inside your mouth pretty rapidly. It's not uncommon to take this piercing out for a couple hours to see grandma or that crazy aunt of yours and have problems getting it back in. Always, with any oral piercing, monitor the teeth, your gum structure, in your bone structure in the area. If there is any noticeable signs of discomfort or damage, remove the jewelry immediately. Lots of times, once that damage starts, it's irreplaceable. You're not able to repair it. Irreparable? Is that a word? So, in other words, monitor the area. If you have a problem, take the jewelry out. Sorry, you can't have the piercing. Always avoid pressure and trauma to the piercing in jewelry. Especially don't sleep on the piercing even after it heals. And like I mentioned already, check the tightness of the ball regularly if you have threaded jewelry, which in this case would possibly be a circular barbell or a curved barbell. Either of those, the ends can come unscrewed, and they usually fall off at the worst possible time. Now let's talk about the final thing, abandoning the piercing. Okay, you're just going to leave it right there on the doorstep. Removing the jewelry should not be an issue. If the piercing is healing and hasn't healed completely, you do want to keep an eye on it. Make sure that it treat it like any open wound you would on your body. Monitor the area. If you see any signs of infection or other problem, contact a medical professional. Otherwise, it should close like any cut would or wound on your body. If the piercing's been in for a while, the longer you've left it in, the more scarring you're probably going to see. Removing the jewelry, there's really not much you need to do. It will just slowly begin to close, usually connecting first in the center and then slowly outward. This one, though, well, usually you will see the closure on the inside long before you see the outside. What you'll be left with is an indentation scar. It'll look like the piercing's still open. Some people it's really noticeable. Other people it isn't. Other than that, you might have sebum collecting in it occasionally. It's this cottage cheese substance, or not cottage cheese, cream cheese substance. Stinks, smells like dirty bum. Don't worry about it. It's not a sign of infection. Just clean the area. Practice normal hygiene. It should stop doing that. Well, that's all I have to say on this particular piercing today. Lip piercings. Lip piercings. Not labret piercings. Lip piercings. Say it with me, people. Labret piercing. Lip piercing. Till next time, here's hoping only piercings heal with ease and without a single issue. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see if your body piercing needs in the future. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you for watching. Feel free to click on one of these cards and do something else. And I'll see you in the next video.